you've got a tail of young ewes, 1 and 2 year old ewes that are already in poor body condition, they're the ones that are less likely to be there as 5 and 6 and 7 year olds. So you need to get into them early and put in a targeted plan to lift their condition up.
Hello, I'm Kieran Lynch and welcome to OviCast, the Teagasc Sheep podcast. Each episode will bring you latest insights, advice and technical updates for the sheep industry. Why are ewes leaving flocks, and can we actually reduce the level of ewe wastage? We discuss this topic in more detail with Professor Keynon from Massey University in this week's episode. Paul discusses the reasons ewes are culled and lost out of the system. We discuss the impact that can have on flock output, lamb performance and the costs within our systems. Paul talks about the variation in ewe replacement rates in flocks in New Zealand and some of the reasons for the differences among farms. We finish up discussing how we can alter management on farms to improve ewe longevity in a flock and improve overall productivity. We start off the episode with Paul putting the subject in context.
It's often underestimated that we've got animals leaving our flock all year round, and that they're leaving for many reasons. Simple reasons like the ewes dying, but also they're being culled for a number of things that farmers can cull on. And so what actually the net effect is that instead of culling ewes for age at 6 or 7 years of age, very few of our ewes actually make it that far. And that's the case when you look at the replacement rates that are coming in. If farmers have got replacement rates of 25 to 30%, that means there's that many ewes going out of the system every year. And when you then take out 30% each year, and there's less and less of each year age group get, you might only have 10 or 15% of ewes that actually get to that age where you want to cull them. Many farmers are culling it at 6 or 7 years of age because they've gone past that peak performance years of years 4 and 5. They're starting to decline, and farmers are starting to get concerned about those older ewes aren't performing as well, and they're at greater risk to have health issues and therefore greater work for the farmer.
I think it's fair to say probably the only time it really dawns on most of us in the industry is before the ram goes out and we do our final count, well, how many breeding ewes we left, and you start looking back, all of a sudden we realise we have a lot of ewes after dropping out of the system at different stages. I suspect that's the same irrespective of country. It's not really till that point we consider what's after leaving. Fair to say we probably don't think about why they're leaving either.
That's right. They're leaving for a number of reasons. In a New Zealand scenario, they're leaving because a farmer post-weaning might decide to cull some ewes he doesn't like the look of, or believes their performances aren't up to specs. In New Zealand, they might get culled at pregnancy scanning if they're non-pregnant. Generally, all non-pregnant animals are culled then. Then we'll get some culling going on at tail docking in New Zealand. That's at 6 to 8 weeks still. They'll go through and quickly examine the udders of the ewes, and any ewe that's dry at that stage they'll cull as a way of reducing late spring, summer feed demand. So those ewes are going out all the time during the year, dribbling out for at those time points, plus on top of that you get your deaths.
Like a lot of the things you talked about there are good reasons to cull ewes from a flock. I suppose where we're going to come to the latter half of this episode is why are they leaving for those reasons. Probably one of the issues that we need to cover in this is we've put in the same level of effort in getting that ewe into the flock day one, whether it be as a ewe lamb, whether it be as a two-tooth hogget going to a ram. The cost associated with that ewe, the carrying capacity on the farm is limited by that. So with the same effort gone into a ewe, whether she lasts in the system for 7 years or 8 years, as we do if she only lasts for one season.
That's right. You're putting the same effort in, certainly the same effort for the years she's still in the flock. She's eating as much as as in her first year of life. A ewe that lasts for 3 years, it's the same amount in their first year as one that lasts for 7 years. But of course, the 7-year ewe, that's diluted out. The big impact of high wastage is you need to keep more replacements, and by keeping more replacements, that means you'll have more younger ewes, you'll have more 1-year-old yearling ewes, and more 2-year-old ewes as a percentage of your overall flock. And we know that 1-year-old and 2-year-old ewes, when you breed them, have lower ovulation rates, lower conception rates, more likely to be in the second cycle than the first often, and they'll also produce less milk, so their total weaning weight is less. So if you've got more younger ewes as a percentage of your whole flock, your total weight of lamb weaned comes down, and you wean less total lambs. And because you've got more of these young ewes, especially if you're in a scenario where you're not breeding them as yearlings, you've got more unproductive stock eating grass, so you've actually again got a smaller number of total ewes than you would otherwise have. And then the next effect of having less total ewes, because you've got more of these younger ewes, you'll wean less lambs. You've got less lambs to sell, so you get hit there financially. But of course, of those lambs that you do wean, and there's less of them, a greater proportion of them need to be kept as replacements more, so you actually have less lambs again on top of that to sell. So you actually get hit twice when it comes to lamb sales by higher ewe wastage. Ewe wastage is used at a loss through culling or dyeing.
It's fair to say probably with them first pair of ewes, you get a large proportion of those light lambs that tend to be there in the later part of the season too.
That's right, and they're going to those later lambs are going to be lighter, and they're going to cost you more to get them up to a weaning weight in terms of cost of labour and feed.
Okay, so look, just maybe important to clarify here, we're not suggesting we shouldn't keep an appropriate number of replacements or bring in young ewes. The question is there an opportunity there to maybe reduce some of that reproductive wastage or ewe wastage as we go on? So instead of maybe bringing in 25% on certain farms, can we peel that back slightly and keep more productive older ewes? That's where we're coming to with this.
That's exactly right. And in our survey in New Zealand, we have farmers that have replacement rates of slight less than 20%, up to farmers that have replacement rates, just above 30%. And then you look at the ewe deaths during the year, we have farmers that are only losing 5% ewes of deaths, and other farms up at 15 to 18%. So there's huge variation there, which shows you it can be reduced by knowing what your risk factors are and putting in management plans to try to reduce those losses and get in early to stop those ewes coming into a situation where they're either going to be culled because of condition or they're going to be culled because they failed to breed.
Like the example you just mentioned there, this flock staying a stable, totally young number, but you have a difference in replacement rate, something up about 12%, maybe higher in some cases. So in and around the 20% is what we normally consider standard. For those flocks up to 30%, there's obviously something wrong in management on that farm that you can address to maybe reduce that rate. Like if we look at what are the couple of big things that stood out on those farms that needed changing?
Yeah, so under New Zealand conditions, there are a couple of health issues that stood out, which were teeth, lameness, but the biggest issue was ewes in poor body condition or light and live weight. And because those ewes become in a cyclic situation where they're continuing to be of poor body condition, they perform at a lower level in terms of their lambing percentage and the milk production, therefore the weight of the lambs weaned, and they're at greater risk of being culled. So we looked at the fact that, at any one time point, a ewe that's in a poor body condition has a higher risk or a lower probability to still be in a flock the next year. So it's about targeting those poor condition ewes, especially those young ewes, putting the effort into those young ewes. If you've got a tail of young ewes, 1 and 2 year old ewes that are already in good poor body condition, they're the ones that are less likely to be there as 5 and 6 and 7 year olds. So you need to get into them early and put in a targeted plan to lift their condition up. Now, whether that's targeted feeding of them separately or whether it's having a bit of an investigation with your local veterinarian to see if you've got some underlying health issues.
Just parse them too for a moment. Like when we talk about costs and investments, if you were looking at your sheep system in its entirety, you're spending a lot more money by not putting that input into those replacements in the early stage. In other words, and this is a topic that's come up before in the podcast, putting in that investment into those replacements in that first year or first year and a half, depending on what stage you're mating at, does pay you back long term. It always pays you back.
Yep. You can't under-emphasise how important it is to make sure if you're breeding her as a yearling, that she's of good live weight and condition score before you even think about it, and that you feed her well throughout her pregnancy and lactation. But even the ones where you're not breeding as a yearling and you're going to breed them for the first time at 18, 19 months of age, they need to be at those targets. And if they're not at those targets, our on-farm studies showed that they're the ones that don't reach those targets are the ones that are less likely to be there, not just at 5 or 6 years of age, but less likely to be there at 4 years of age. So you've fed them that first year and they're gone by their 4th year. So rather, you really want to feed them well in the first year so you get 6 or 7 years out of them, get your return. And that feed in that first year, the cost of this will dilute it over many years.
Yeah, look, something we touched on the earlier podcast with you about early winning. If you had to break a cycle in a given year, that is the right action to take to address those issues.
That's right. The easiest period of the year to get a ewe to get onto condition is when she's not lactating and before she's pregnant, because when she's lactating, she's struggling to consume enough to meet milk production probably anyway. She'll lose condition because that's her buffer. And in pregnancy, she's going to use her buffer. So that window from weaning through breeding is a very important window, and it's an often underutilised window to get your ewes right. People get to weaning and think, the ewes are sorted, put them aside, now I'm going to focus on my lambs. And that's a very short-term approach. Because, your lamb you're going to sell within hopefully a couple of months. Whereas your ewe, if she's a young ewe, you want her for 5 or 6 years. So you really want to be investing in her post her first weaning, and any ewe that's in poor condition.
Yeah, managing a separate cohort. Look, if we take the other aspects, the nutritional management has a huge role to play. There is a case though for the health issues on the farm too, and potentially maybe looking at a cohort of those thin ewes, getting in contact, in our case, with your region veterinary labs, and maybe trying to get to the root of what is the problem. Why are these continually thin? There could be an underlying health issue. I know that's something you've looked at as well on farms in New Zealand.
Yeah, that's right. So, and the health issues always differ from farm to farm. There are some underpinning ones like lameness, feet, pneumonia that you seem to see on a lot of farms, and we also have yonis as well. But then on some farms you'll have slightly different issues, and so you've got to be very careful about just taking a blanket approach. It is certainly worthwhile the financial investment to get a veterinarian in or a consultant in to look at your poor condition ewes, the ones that are most likely to be culled, and try to understand what's driving that, and then come up with an animal health plan. Because if you're going to address that, not only will it influence those ewes, but it'll have the same influence the next 10 or 15 years in all the other ewes, because you've addressed the underlying issue that's causing high wastage on your farm.
Yeah, I think that's the important point. Like, okay, there's a slight short-term loss potentially there or not in maybe looking at those thin ewes, maybe send them for PMs, but it's that long-term gain. Like that, them health issues generally are on farm year to year, so you're investing in the future there as opposed to having to deal with this consistently.
That's right. And getting rid of the underlying health issues, not only will it result in lower replacements, so you'll end up having more lambs to sell, it'll actually reduce your time and labour costs on your farm, because when you've got sick animals or poor condition animals, you end up putting more effort into them, trying to get them back all the time, and it becomes cyclic.
So Paul, like in essence, a lot of this goes back to a lot of the basics. It might seem a little bit simplistic, but managing condition correctly, dealing with your health issues, engage with professionals when you need them, it can make a big impact on your overall productivity in a flock over a number of years. That's
right, and it can be as simple as that. I don't think we need to overthink it. Targeting those tail end ewes, so you don't have those tail poor condition ewes. Having them around that 3 or higher all the time, so they're less likely to get into these health issue situations is really what you want to do, and getting the right advice. And of course, what you're also doing there is you're going to bring your lamb performance and everything else up with it, and your financial margin. That's right. A better conditioned ewe, not only will she stay in the flock longer, she'll give birth to more lambs because you'll have a higher ovulation rate. Those lambs are more likely to survive because she'll produce more milk, and those lambs will be heavier at weaning, so therefore you've got less inputs to get them to that slaughter weight. Paul, really good having you on today. Look, appreciate your time. An interesting topic, certainly one we should put a bit more attention into. Cheers, thanks. We'll have to finish the episode up there. I'd like to thank Paul again for giving up his time to come on with us. Discuss what's a very important area, is probably one that deserves more attention at farm level. He's highlighted some key management areas we can focus on to actually improve young longevity within a flock. I think they're applicable to any flock, regardless of culling rate or replacement level. It's all areas we can actually look at to improve our output and productivity and reduce the costs in our systems. That's it for me for this episode. Again, for updates on our sheep programme, keep an eye on our Twitter page at Teagasc Sheep. I'm Kieran Lynch. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us for more episodes.